Have you ever saved someone, only to discover they were saving you too? August 15th, 1877, Arizona Territory, near Fort Grant. The canyon echoed with gunshots, sharp cracks that split the desert air like thunder. A woman ran, her Apache dress torn and dusty, blood streaking down her temple. Behind her, 4 riders came hard, their horses kicking up red clouds that caught the late afternoon sun. She stumbled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The rocks beneath her feet gave way. She fell hard, her head striking stone with a sickening sound. The world spun. Blood pooled in the dirt beneath her. The riders pulled up short, their horses stamping and snorting. One man dismounted, spat tobacco juice onto the ground near her still form. He laughed, a sound without warmth or humanity. "Leave her. The desert will finish what we started." They rode away, their laughter fading into the vast emptiness of the Arizona wilderness. Silence fell, the kind of silence that comes before death. Vultures began to circle overhead, patient and knowing. The next morning, Sangre de Cristo Mountains, 18 miles north. Dawn broke over the pine forest in shades of gold and amber. A stream ran cold and clear through the rocks. Somewhere in the distance, an elk bugled its morning challenge to the world. Caleb Thornwood worked methodically, his knife moving with practiced precision through the hide of a deer he had taken at first light. He was a big man, standing well over 6 feet, with shoulders broadened by years of mountain living. His beard grew thick and dark, covering the lower half of his weathered face. Long hair, tied back with a strip of leather, fell past his collar. A scar ran down his left cheek, a memento from a grizzly bear that had come closer to killing him than he cared to remember. His buckskin jacket, stained with the work of skinning, moved easily across the powerful muscles of his back and arms. These were the arms of a man who split wood, hauled water, and tracked game through terrain that would break softer men. His hands, large and calloused, worked the knife with surprising care. He paused, straightening to look up at the sky. His eyes, the color of deep forest shade, held the thoughtful expression of a man used to his own company. 8 years up here, he said to no one at all. His voice carried the dry humor of a man who had learned to laugh at his own thoughts. Thought I'd miss people. Turns out I don't. He went back to his work, pulling the hide free with steady pressure. Elk don't lie. Bears don't steal. Mountain lions are honest about wanting to kill you. A chuckle escaped him, low and brief, the sound of a man who had made peace with solitude, or thought he had. Movement caught his eye. Far to the south, over the trail that wound through the lower elevations, vultures circled. Not just 1 or 2, but a dozen or more. They rode the thermals in that patient spiral that meant something was dying or already dead. Caleb's frown deepened. That was a lot of scavengers for a deer or coyote. He made his decision quickly, wrapped the meat, secured it to his pack mule, and swung up onto his horse. The animal, a sturdy mountain-bred mare, knew these trails as well as her rider. They headed south, toward whatever had drawn Death's winged attendants. What Caleb Thornwood did not know, as he rode down from his mountain sanctuary, was that this decision, this simple choice to investigate circling birds, would change everything. His life, his purpose, his very understanding of why he had hidden himself away for 8 long years. 3 miles to the south, an Apache woman lay dying, waiting for a miracle she did not expect to receive. The trail, mid-morning. Caleb reached the lower elevations where the pines gave way to scrub and red rock. The vultures grew agitated at his approach, several landing heavily on nearby boulders. They watched him with ancient, knowing eyes. He dismounted, his hand moving instinctively to check the rifle slung across his back. Not that he expected trouble from birds, but a man who survived alone in these mountains learned to check his weapons often. Blood stained the rocks, not a small amount. A trail of it led off the main path, drag marks visible in the dust. Torn fabric, the distinctive pattern of Apache weaving, caught on a thorny bush. Hoof prints, multiple horses, all shod in the manner of cavalry mounts. Caleb's jaw tightened. He knew what cavalry horses meant in Apache country. Nothing good. He followed the blood trail 50 yards into the rocks. Then he saw her. She lay face down in the dirt, her long black hair spread across her back and shoulders, matted with dried blood. One arm was flung out, fingers still curled as if reaching for something. Her breathing was so shallow he almost missed it, that faint rise and fall of her ribs barely visible beneath her torn dress. Caleb dropped to one knee beside her, his movements quick but careful. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. It was there, weak and irregular, but there. Still alive. Barely. He worked fast. Years of frontier living had taught him basic field medicine. He pulled his canteen free, dampened a cloth, and cleaned the worst of the blood from the head wound. It was deep, would need proper stitching, but it had stopped bleeding on its own. That was something. He tore strips from his own shirt, fashioned a rough bandage. His hands, despite their size, moved with surprising gentleness. This close he could see the bruises that covered her arms and shoulders, defense wounds on her hands where she had tried to protect herself, cracked ribs showing in the way she breathed. Someone had beaten her badly, then left her to die. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though he expected no answer. With careful deliberation, he lifted her. She weighed less than he expected, her body slight despite the warrior strength he could sense in her frame. He carried her to his mule, the steadier mount for an injured person, and secured her with rope so she would not fall during the ride. The woman did not wake, did not stir. Only that shallow breathing continued, stubborn and determined even in unconsciousness. Caleb mounted his horse, took the mule's lead rope, and turned back toward his cabin. The ride would take 2 hours. He pushed the pace as much as he dared. "Hold on, we're almost there." Behind them, the vultures rose into the sky, their patience unrewarded. Caleb's cabin. Midday. The structure sat in a small clearing, built from pine logs chinked with clay. One room, simple and functional. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rough table, 2 chairs, a cot against the far wall. Animal hides hung from the rafters. Tools lined the walls, everything in its place, the ordered space of a man who lived alone and liked it that way. Caleb carried the woman inside, placed her carefully on the cot. He covered her with a wool blanket, the best he had. The fire in the hearth had gone cold overnight. He built it back up, the flames catching quickly in the dry kindling. She was Apache. That was clear from her features and the jewelry she still wore, turquoise and silver at her throat. But her dress, though traditional in style, showed signs of regular work around white settlements. The fabric was store-bought, not home-woven. An Apache woman who moved between both worlds. That took courage, or desperation. "You're safe now, whoever you are. I've got you." The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had to offer. He set to work, heated water in his largest pot, found clean cloths. His hands, built for wielding axes and skinning knives, worked with surprising care as he cleaned her wounds properly. The head injury would scar, but it would heal. The ribs, those were trickier. 3 at least, maybe 4, cracked or broken. He had nothing for that except time and rest. As evening fell, he pulled his chair close to the cot and settled in to watch. His rifle lay across his lap. Not because he expected trouble tonight, but because habits formed in 8 years of solitary living died hard. The woman's breathing grew stronger as the hours passed. Once, she murmured something in Apache, words he did not understand. Her hand moved, reaching for something that was not there, then fell still again. Caleb dozed lightly, the way mountain men learn to sleep. One part of his mind always aware, always listening. Near dawn, her breathing changed. He was awake instantly. Morning. The first words. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion swimming in their dark depths. She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain that lanced through her ribs, and fell back against the rough pillow. Caleb was at her side immediately, his movements careful not to startle her further. Easy now, small sips. He held a cup of water to her lips. She drank greedily at first, then more slowly as her body remembered how. When she had finished, he set the cup aside. Their eyes met. Hers were wary, afraid, searching his face for signs of threat. His were steady, patient, asking nothing. "Who are you?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Caleb Thornwood. Found you half dead on the trail yesterday. Figured I'd do the neighborly thing." He paused, and something almost like humor touched his voice. "Though neighbor is a stretch, nearest person is 15 miles away." She studied him, taking in the size of him, the scars, the weapons, the cabin around them, its ordered simplicity. "You hungry? I've got deer stew. Not fancy, but it's food." She nodded slowly, not taking her eyes off him. He ladled stew into a wooden bowl, handed it to her with a spoon. She ate slowly at first, testing, then with genuine hunger. The hot food seemed to bring some color back to her face. Caleb settled back into his chair, giving her space. The fire crackled. Outside, the morning birds began their songs. "This is good," she said finally, the first hint of something other than fear in her voice. 8 years alone you learned to cook or starve." He gestured vaguely at the mountains beyond his walls. "Deer taught me patience. Burned a lot of meat before I figured it out." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just two people, strangers, sharing space and sustenance. "You don't have to tell me what happened," Caleb said after a while. "But when you're ready, I'm listening." She looked at him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face seemed to ease something inside her. "They tried to kill me, left me for dead. They failed. That's what matters." He stood, moved to the fireplace to add another log. When he turned back, she was still watching him, but the fear had lessened. "Rest now. We'll figure the rest out later." She closed her eyes, but he could tell she was not sleeping, just thinking, processing, beginning the long journey from victim to survivor. Caleb settled back into his chair. He had questions, plenty of them. But they could wait. For now, she was alive. She was safe. And somehow, in ways he did not yet understand, her presence had already begun to shift something inside him that had been frozen for 8 long years. The mountain man who had fled civilization to escape his demons had just invited the world back into his isolated sanctuary. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple act of mercy had set in motion events that would test them both in ways they could not imagine. 2 days later. Afternoon. The woman, whose name he still did not know, had grown stronger. She could sit up now without gasping, could move carefully around the cabin. She watched him with sharp intelligence, missing nothing. Caleb returned from checking his trap lines to find her examining his rifle where it hung on the wall. "You're not a soldier," she said without preamble. Her voice was stronger now, educated. "Too many traps. You're a trapper. That rifle is a Sharps 50-90, buffalo hunter gun, but no buffalo pelts, deer and elk instead." She turned to face him, and he saw the mind working behind those dark eyes. "You avoid towns. You live hidden. Why?" Caleb raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. "You're observant. Survival depends on noticing details." He set down the rabbits he had caught, moved to pour himself coffee from the pot that always sat warming by the fire. "You're right. I was Army Scout 8 years ago. Saw things I'm not proud of. Came up here to forget." He turned to face her, met her gaze directly. "What about you?" "Apache woman who speaks English better than most whites I know." She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "I was interpreter. Indian Agency, Fort Grant. I helped my people negotiate with government, until I found out the Indian agent was stealing from us." Caleb's expression hardened. "Let me guess. You confronted him." "I gathered evidence. He found out, killed his partner, framed me for murder. Bitterness laced her words. His men beat me, left me to die. They think I'm dead. Caleb stood silent, processing this. Then he began to pace, the way he did when thinking through a problem. This Indian agent, he's got power? Captain Marcus Brennan. He controls Fort Grant, bribes the territorial governor, has 40 soldiers under his command. And you've got? She lifted her chin, defiant despite her injuries. I have my memory. Every number, every transaction, every name. I memorized everything before I ran. Caleb stopped pacing, looked at her with new respect. Photographic memory? My father called it a gift from spirits. I call it a curse. I can't forget anything I see. Right now, that curse might be your salvation. He moved to the window, looked out at the mountains he had called home for so long. There's a federal marshal in Tucson. If you can testify with those details, he might listen. Brennan has wanted posters, $500 reward. Every bounty hunter from here to Santa Fe is looking for me. Then we don't go to Santa Fe. We go through the mountains, trails only I know. He turned back to her, and something like a grim smile touched his bearded face. And if bounty hunters come, they'll regret it. She studied him, this mountain man who had saved her life and now offered to risk his own. Why would you do this? You don't know me. Maybe I'm tired of running from the past. Maybe it's time to face it instead. Fort Grant. The same afternoon. Captain Marcus Brennan stood at his office window, hands clasped behind his back. He was 49, gray creeping into his hair, his uniform pressed and proper. A scar ran across the back of his right hand, memento of a raid that had taken everything from him years ago. Sergeant Luther Hayes stood before him, nervous sweat beading on his forehead. Status report, Sergeant. Sir, the Apache woman's body wasn't found, but with her injuries, animals probably. Brennan turned, his voice sharp as broken glass. Probably. I want certainty. I want her corpse, or I want confirmation she's dead. Images flashed through his mind. His wife Sarah, his daughter Emily, only 6 years old, the burning ranch, the bodies, all because of Apache raiders, all because he had tried to build something good in this God-forsaken territory. Sir, what if she reaches a marshal? She worked in this office. She knows nothing without proof. The ledgers are locked in that safe. Brennan pointed at the iron box bolted to his floor. Only I have the combination. What about Whitmore's journal? The one he kept? Burned, I made sure. But doubt crept into his voice. The woman herself was still a threat. Her testimony alone could trigger a federal investigation. Put out a new bounty, $1,000, dead or alive. Hire every tracker, bounty hunter, mercenary between here and the Mexico border. Sir, that's a lot of money. I've stolen $80,000 in 3 years, Sergeant. I can afford $1,000 to ensure my retirement. Brennan pulled out a map, spread it across his desk, circled an area with his finger. She can't have gone far. Injured, on foot, in hostile territory. He tapped the map. There's only one man who knows these mountains well enough to hide someone long-term. Who? Caleb Thornwood, ex-Army scout. Went rogue 8 years ago after Sand Creek. Lives somewhere in Sangre de Cristo range. A cold smile crossed Brennan's face. Find him. If the squaw's alive, he'll know. Back at the cabin. Evening. Caleb stood at his window, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. Behind him, the woman moved quietly, testing her strength by walking the length of the cabin and back. He heard her stop, turned to find her watching him. My name is Ayanna, she said. It means eternal blossom. Caleb Thornwood, but you already knew that part. Why did you really save me? He was quiet for a long moment. Because 8 years ago, I stood by while innocent people died. I told myself it wasn't my fight, wasn't my responsibility. I've lived with that choice every day since. He met her eyes. Maybe I saved you to prove to myself I could make a different choice this time. Or maybe, Ayanna said softly, we're saving each other. Outside, unknown to either of them, a tracker moved through the forest. Following signs, getting closer. The hunt had begun. The mountain passes of Arizona territory held secrets that only men like Caleb Thornwood knew. Ancient trails carved by Apache feet, hidden springs where water ran cold even in August heat, ridges where a man could see for 30 miles in any direction. These were the paths they would take to Tucson, 120 miles of hard country that would test them both. Morning came early. Caleb spread his hand-drawn map across the rough table, his calloused finger tracing the route west. Normal way goes through Fort Grant. 3 days on a good horse. But we can't go that way. His finger moved to trace a different path entirely. We go west, through Superstition Mountains. Harder terrain, but away from patrols. 5 days, maybe 6 if the weather turns. Ayanna studied the map with the sharp focus he was beginning to expect from her. Her ribs were healing, the color returning to her face, but she still moved carefully. Water sources? Caleb smiled slightly. Good question. The kind that kept people alive in this country. 3 spots. Here, here, and here. He marked each location. We rationed between them. They packed with the efficiency of people who understood that every ounce mattered. Dried deer meat wrapped in cloth. 3 canteens, filled from the cold stream behind the cabin. Ammunition, 150 rounds for his Sharps rifle and the Colt revolver at his hip. Blankets, rope, his hunting knife with its worn leather handle. Ayanna's medicine pouch, the one thing she had kept through everything, hung at her belt. Caleb pulled a bundle of men's clothing from a wooden chest, held it out to her. You'll need these. Riding in a dress through mountains is suicide. Ayanna unfolded the pants. They were far too large, made for a man of Caleb's size. She held them up, and despite everything, something like amusement touched her face. I'm not sure these will fit. Belt. Use a belt. His tone was absolutely serious. I don't get many visitors, especially not women. The sound that came from Ayanna was unexpected. A laugh, brief but genuine, the first real one he had heard from her. Caleb found himself smiling in response, a half grin that felt strange on his bearded face after years of solitude. They rode out within the hour, 10 miles south, mid-afternoon. The trail wound through country that changed with every mile. Pine forest gave way to juniper and sage. Red rock rose in fantastic formations, sculpted by wind and time into shapes that seemed almost deliberate. The August sun beat down without mercy. Caleb rode in front, Ayanna behind him on the same horse. She was still healing, not strong enough yet for the demands of controlling her own mount through difficult terrain. She sat close, her arms around his waist for balance, and if either of them thought about the intimacy of the arrangement, neither spoke of it. Suddenly Caleb's hand went up, the universal signal for silence and danger. He pulled the horse to a stop, his head tilted, listening to something Ayanna could not yet hear. Then she caught it too, the sound of multiple horses, moving fast, coming from the south. Riders, at least 6, get down. They dismounted quickly. Caleb led the horse behind a tumble of boulders, large enough to hide both animal and humans. They crouched low, waiting. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder. 6 men rode past, rough-looking and heavily armed, the kind of men who made their living on the dangerous edges of civilization. The leader held a paper in his hand, glancing at it as he rode. $1,000 for an Apache murderess. Let's check the north trails. His voice carried clearly in the dry air. The other men nodded, spurring their horses faster. Within moments they were gone, dust settling slowly back to earth in their wake. Caleb and Ayanna waited 5 full minutes before moving. When they finally stood, Caleb's face was grim. They're between us and Tucson now. So what do we do? He studied the terrain, the way he had learned to do during his years as an Army scout, reading the land like other men read books. We go higher. Mountain passes they won't expect. Harder, but safer. Ayanna touched his arm. When he turned, she was looking at him with an urgency that made him pay close attention. Wait, I know those men. One of them, the one with the red beard, that's Dakota Jim. He tracks for the army sometimes. She paused. He's good, very good. He'll find our trail within a day. Caleb looked back the way they had come, seeing their tracks clearly in the dust. Then he looked at the country ahead, and something shifted in his expression. A decision made. Then we don't leave a trail. We go through the creek, 3 miles upstream. Water hides tracks. They mounted again and turned north, toward the sound of running water. The creek, late afternoon. Cold water splashed around the horse's legs as they moved upstream. The animal picked its way carefully over smooth stones, occasionally stumbling but always recovering. The water was barely 2 feet deep, but it was enough. Behind them, their tracks disappeared as the current smoothed the stream bed. After 2 miles, Ayanna suddenly spoke. "Stop." Caleb pulled up immediately. "What?" She pointed at rocks along the bank. To him they looked like any other rocks, but she saw something different. "Those rocks. That pattern. That's an Apache trail marker. My people camped here once. There's a hidden trail, goes up the ridge, invisible from below." Caleb studied the rocks again. Now that she pointed it out, he could see it. Stones placed just so, in a pattern that looked natural but was not. The kind of sign that only those who knew what to look for would ever notice. "Show me." Ayanna guided him to the bank. The trail was there, overgrown with brush, masked by fallen branches. But it existed, and it led up, toward high ground. They climbed for an hour, the horse struggling on the steep grade. Finally, they reached a ridge that offered a view of the country below. From here they could see for miles. Movement caught Caleb's eye. Down below, on the trail they had abandoned, 6 riders circled in confusion. Even from this distance he could see their frustration. "Trail disappears. Where'd they go?" Dakota Jim's voice carried faintly up to them on the wind. Caleb and Ayanna exchanged a look. A small victory, but a real one. As the sun touched the western horizon, they made camp on the high ridge. Caleb built a small fire, shielded by rocks so it could not be seen from below. They ate jerky and hardtack, washing it down with water from the canteens. Silence stretched between them, comfortable now rather than tense. Finally, Ayanna spoke. "Why did you leave the army?" Caleb stared into the fire for a long time before answering. "Sand Creek, 1864. I was 21. The words came slowly, each one carrying weight. "Colonel ordered us to attack a village, said it was hostile warriors. It wasn't. It was elders, women, children." Ayanna said nothing. She knew of Sand Creek. Every Apache knew that story. It was a wound that had never healed. "I didn't fire," Caleb continued. "But I didn't stop it either. I just stood there." Bitterness filled his voice. Coward's choice. Not evil enough to kill, not brave enough to refuse. Ayanna watched him in the firelight, this big man with his scarred face and haunted eyes. "My grandmother used to say, the man who regrets his past can still shape his future." She paused. "You didn't stand by this time. You saved me. That doesn't erase what I didn't do. No, but it starts a new path. That's all anyone can do." Caleb looked at her then, really looked. Not just the woman he had rescued, but a person of depth and wisdom who had survived things that would have broken others. "You're stronger than I thought," he said quietly. "I'm alive because I have to be. My people need the truth told." She stood, testing her strength by walking to the edge of the ridge. Caleb followed, standing beside her as they looked out at the vast darkness of the territory. In Apache, we call the stars those who wait forever. They watch all that happens below, witness everything. Lot to witness lately. Ayanna smiled slightly. Thank you, for not asking too many questions, for just helping. Mountain taught me something. Don't overthink. See something that needs doing, do it. He paused, then added with that dry humor she was beginning to recognize, Besides, you're good company. First person I've talked to in 3 years. 3 years? Elk don't talk back. It's peaceful. Am I disturbing your peace? Yeah. He glanced at her. But it's not terrible. They both smiled then, small expressions that carried more meaning than words. When they returned to the fire and rolled in their blankets to sleep, something had shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but the beginning of trust, the foundation of partnership. Morning came with an arrow. The projectile struck the tree 6 inches from Caleb's head with a solid thunk. He was awake instantly, rolling to his feet, hand reaching for his rifle. Ayanna scrambled up beside him, eyes wide. A voice shouted from the rocks above them, speaking Apache, sharp and urgent. Shidiji, stop! Ayanna gasped, recognition flooding her face. Dakota! From behind the boulders, a man emerged. He was perhaps 29, lean and hard from life in rough country. His clothing was a mix of Apache and white, practical rather than traditional. A Winchester rifle rested in his hands, but he held it loosely now, not threatening. Caleb kept his own rifle aimed steadily. Friend of yours? My brother. The word changed everything. Caleb did not lower his weapon, but his finger moved away from the trigger. Dakota spoke rapidly in Apache, the words too fast for Caleb to catch even if he had understood the language. Ayanna answered in the same tongue, her voice rising with emotion. Finally Dakota switched to English, looking directly at Caleb. Lower gun, white man. I not here to hurt. Then why the arrow? Warning. Brennan's men behind you. Maybe 2 hours. Ayanna stepped forward, between the 2 armed men. Her face showed confusion and hurt. You're tracking for Brennan? Dakota's face twisted with anguish. Mother is sick. Tribe is starving. He pays $100 to find you. He looked at his sister, and the pain in his eyes was genuine. I need money for medicine, food for our family. Caleb's voice cut through, cold and challenging. So turn us in. Collect your $100. He paused. Or decide family means more than money. Dakota stood frozen, torn between competing loyalties. His eyes moved from his sister's bruised face to the rifle in Caleb's steady hands. A memory came to him, unbidden. He was 10 years old, swimming in the river. The current caught him, pulled him under. His lungs burned. Then hands grabbed him, pulled him up into air and light. Ayanna, only 12, had jumped in after him, had saved his life. He lowered his rifle. I will not betray blood. His voice was quiet but firm. But I cannot fight Brennan openly. He will kill Mother if I help you. Then what do we do? Ayanna asked. I give you time. Dakota spoke urgently now. I tell Brennan I found your trail going east toward Santa Fe. That gives you 2 days west before he realizes I lied. Caleb understood immediately what that meant. He'll know. He'll come after you. Then I disappear. Take Mother into the mountains where he can't find us. Dakota looked at his sister with fierce intensity. Sister, you must succeed. Expose Brennan. Free our people from his theft. That's the only way Mother survives long term. He moved closer, and now he spoke quickly, sharing information that might save their lives. Brennan has evidence locked in the fort safe, ledgers showing all the stolen money. Without those, it's your word against his. How do we get them? Caleb asked. You don't. Fort has 40 soldiers. It's suicide. Dakota thought for a moment. Unless you wait for trial, when he brings evidence to the courtroom. Will there be a trial, or will he just kill me? Ayanna's question was practical, not fearful. If you reach the federal marshal alive, Brennan must give you a trial. It's federal law. Dakota embraced his sister then, held her tight. He whispered in Apache, words that Caleb could not understand, but whose meaning was clear in their tone. Pride, love, farewell. To Caleb he said simply, "Protect her, mountain man, or I will find you." "I will." Dakota stepped back, looked at them both one last time, then he turned and disappeared into the rocks as silently as he had appeared. Ayanna stood very still for a moment. Then her shoulders began to shake. Not with fear, but with the release of emotion held too long. Tears came, and she did not try to stop them. Caleb stood awkwardly, uncertain. Comfort was not something he had practiced in 8 years of solitude. Finally, clumsily, he reached out and patted her shoulder. "He's a brave man, a good brother. He's sacrificing everything for me. Family does that, real family." Caleb paused, then added quietly, "He gave us time. We need to use it well." Ayanna wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders. The moment of weakness was over. She was a survivor again, a fighter. "Let's go, before his sacrifice means nothing." They mounted and rode west, toward Tucson and whatever waited there. 2 days later. Trading post. The structure sat alone in empty country, adobe walls baked hard by decades of sun. A hand-painted sign proclaimed it Sam Carter's trading post. Horses stood at the hitching rail, 2 mules, and what looked like a freight wagon being loaded with supplies. They needed ammunition and food. Their supplies were running low, and they still had 3 days of hard riding ahead. Caleb approached alone, leaving Ayanna hidden in a stand of cottonwoods a quarter-mile distant. No sense advertising that he had company, especially company with a price on her head. Inside, the store was dim and cool. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything a man might need to survive in this harsh country. Behind the counter stood Sam Carter, 68 years old, gray-bearded and sharp-eyed. He looked up as Caleb entered. "Thornwood, thought you died up in them mountains." "Not yet, Sam. Need supplies. Ammunition, food, whiskey." "You in trouble?" Sam had known Caleb for years, back when he still came down from the mountains occasionally. He recognized tension when he saw it. "When am I not?" As Sam gathered the supplies, he pulled a paper from beneath his counter, a wanted poster. He laid it out where Caleb could see. "Brennan's offering $1,000 now, for an Apache woman. Murdered a soldier, they say." Sam watched Caleb's face carefully as he spoke. "You believe it?" Caleb asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I know Brennan. Man's slimier than snake oil." Sam's eyes narrowed. "Why you asking?" This was the moment. The choice that Caleb had known was coming. Trust or deception, partnership or solitude. "Because I have her, and she's innocent." Sam froze. His hand moved slightly toward the shotgun he kept under the counter. Then he stopped, studying Caleb's face. "Prove it." Caleb walked to the door, stepped out, made a gesture. Within moments, Ayanna appeared, moving carefully but steadily toward the trading post. She entered, and Sam's eyes went immediately to her face. The bruises were fading but still visible. The split lip, the way she held herself, favoring her left side where the ribs were still healing. "Who did this?" "Brennan's men. Because I found out he's been stealing from my people." Sam looked at Caleb. "You sure about her?" "As sure as I've been about anything." The old man thought for a long moment. Then he nodded. "My grandson's wife is Apache. Good woman. If Brennan's hurting her people, then he's made an enemy of me too." He began adding more supplies to the pile on the counter. "I'll help. What do you need?" The sound of horses outside cut off Caleb's reply. Many horses. Sam moved to the window, peered through the dusty glass. "Brennan, 20 soldiers." Caleb's hand went to his revolver. "Back door?" "Root cellar, through there." Sam pointed to a trap door barely visible beneath a rug. "Go, now!" As Caleb and Ayanna moved, Sam stepped to the front door. By the time Brennan strode in, Sam was behind his counter looking elderly and harmless. "Sam Carter, seen any Apache women?" "Nope, just me and my arthritis." Brennan's eyes narrowed. He began to search the store, methodical and thorough. Behind him, Sergeant Luther Hayes stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. Brennan found the supplies piled on the counter. Fresh food, ammunition, 2 extra canteens, all purchased within the last few minutes. "You're lying, old man." "Prove it." Brennan's fist moved faster than Sam could react. The blow caught the old man across the face, sent him sprawling. Luther turned away, unable to watch. Outside, hidden in the root cellar beneath the store, Caleb heard Sam cry out. Every muscle in his body tensed. He started to move, to go back. Ayanna grabbed his arm, held tight. "He gave us time, don't waste it, waste." They waited in the darkness, listening to boots above them, to Brennan's angry questions and Sam's stubborn silence. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, the soldiers left. They emerged cautiously. Sam sat behind his counter holding a cloth to his bleeding mouth. When he saw them, he waved them away. "Get moving, before he figures out where you went." "Sam, I'm sorry," Caleb began. "Save it. Just make sure his sacrifice means something. Expose that bastard." They left through the back, mounted, and rode hard into the gathering darkness. Neither spoke for miles. The weight of what had happened hung between them. Another good man had paid a price for their survival. The debt they owed kept growing. As the moon rose, turning the desert silver, Ayanna finally broke the silence. "How many more people will suffer before we reach Tucson?" "I don't know," Caleb answered honestly. "But each one makes it more important that we succeed." "And if we fail?" "We don't fail. We can't afford to." Behind them, unknown to either of them, Captain Marcus Brennan sat in his tent, studying maps by lamplight. His face was twisted with rage and something more. Desperation. He had stolen $80,000 over 3 years, built an empire of corruption that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. One Apache woman threatened all of it. He would stop her, whatever it took, whoever got in the way. The hunt continued, and ahead, Tucson waited. The Superstition Mountains rose like broken teeth against the Arizona sky. Ancient volcanic rock, twisted into formations that seemed impossible, that looked as if giants had fought here and left their weapons scattered across the landscape. This was country that broke horses and killed the unprepared. This was the path Caleb had chosen. They climbed through terrain that grew steeper with each mile. The horse struggled on grades so severe that both riders had to dismount and lead the animal on foot. Ayanna's breathing came hard, her healing ribs protesting the exertion. More than once she stumbled, catching herself on rocks that cut her palms. Caleb caught her the 3rd time she fell, his big hands steadying her before she could hit the ground. "We can rest." "No." Her voice was stubborn, determined. "Brennan doesn't rest. We keep moving." "You're hurt. Pride won't heal broken ribs. And stopping won't get us to Tucson." They stood facing each other on that narrow mountain trail, both breathing hard, both refusing to give ground. Then Caleb did something unexpected. He laughed, a low rumble from deep in his chest. "Stubborn. I like that." He opened his saddlebag, pulled out strips of leather and clean cloth. His hands, those bare paw hands as Ayanna had called them, moved with surprising gentleness as he fashioned a makeshift brace for her ribs. "This is going to help, but I need to wrap it tight, around your ribs." He hesitated, suddenly awkward. This required touching her, wrapping the brace around her torso. In another time, another place, it would have been inappropriate. Here, it was survival. Ayanna understood his hesitation. "Just do it. I trust you." Those 3 words carried more weight than either of them acknowledged. Trust, in this country, between people from different worlds, was not given lightly. Caleb wrapped the brace carefully, his fingers working the leather and cloth into place. He kept his eyes on his work, respectful even in this necessary intimacy. When he pulled the final knot tight, Ayanna gasped, but did not complain. "Tighter?" "Yes, it helps." When he finished, she took a careful breath. The brace held her ribs firm, letting her breathe without the sharp pain that had plagued her for days. "Better?" "Much. Thank you." She paused, then added with the hint of humor he was learning to watch for, "You're gentle, for a man with hands like bear paws. Bears taught me, be gentle or die." She laughed despite herself, then coughed, then laughed again. It was a good sound in this harsh place. They continued climbing as the sun reached its peak and began its slow descent toward evening. Neither spoke much. The trail demanded all their attention. One wrong step could mean a fall, injury, death. As shadows lengthened across the rocks, they reached a high saddle between two peaks. From here they could see both the way they had come and the country ahead. Miles and miles of empty land, broken only by distant mountains and the silver thread of a river far below. Caleb studied the view with the eye of a man who had spent years reading terrain. Something in his expression shifted. "What is it?" Ayanna asked. "Dust. South of here, maybe 10 miles. He pointed at barely visible clouds rising against the darkening sky. "Riders. A lot of them." "Brennan?" "Maybe. Or maybe just cavalry on patrol." He did not sound convinced. "Either way, we stay high tonight. Up here we can see them coming." They made camp in a shallow depression that offered some shelter from the wind. Caleb built no fire this night. Too visible, too dangerous. They ate cold jerky and shared water, watching the land below turn from gold to purple to deep shadow as night claimed the desert. "Tell me about your family," Ayanna said into the darkness. Caleb was quiet so long she thought he would not answer. Then his voice came, low and measured. "Father was a farmer in Missouri. Good man. Believed in hard work and keeping your word." He paused. "Died when I was 19. Fever took him in 3 days. Mother followed 6 months later. Think she died of a broken heart as much as anything." "No brothers? Sisters?" "Had a sister, Rebecca. She was younger than me by 5 years. His voice went even quieter. "Married a man who went west for gold. Never heard from them again." "So you're alone." "Been alone a long time." Ayanna shifted slightly, finding a more comfortable position against the rock behind her. The stars were coming out now, thousands of them in the clear mountain air. "My father was Mexican. Trader who came to Apache lands to buy horses and stayed because he fell in love with my mother." She smiled at the memory. "He taught me Spanish and English. Said languages were bridges between worlds. Smart man." "He was. Died when I was 15. Horse fell on him." The pain of that old loss colored her voice. "Mother raised us after that, Dakota and me. She taught us to be proud of both our heritages, to walk in both worlds." "That's why you became an interpreter." "Yes. I thought I could help. Build those bridges my father talked about." Bitterness crept in. "But men like Brennan don't want bridges. They want walls." Caleb turned to look at her, though in the darkness he could barely see her face. "You're still building bridges. This thing you're doing, exposing the corruption, that's a bridge too, between truth and justice. If I live long enough to build it." "You will. I'll make sure of it." The certainty in his voice surprised them both. This was more than helping a stranger now. Somewhere in the days of riding together, of shared danger and small confidences, something had shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but the foundation for it, the recognition that two people, thrown together by chance, might be stronger together than either could be alone. They slept in shifts that night, one always watching while the other rested. When dawn came, cold and clear, they descended the western slope of the Superstitions toward the hidden Apache camp that Ayanna had told him about. The Apache camp. Midday. They approached carefully, Caleb following Ayanna's lead. She called out in Apache, identifying herself, asking permission to enter. An answer came back from the rocks, and tension that Caleb had not realized he was carrying eased slightly. The camp was small, perhaps 15 people, hidden in a box canyon that could not be seen until you were almost upon it. Wickiups made of brush and hide dotted the canyon floor. Cook fires burned low, their smoke dispersed by careful placement to avoid detection from a distance. An old man came forward to meet them. He was perhaps 70, his face deeply lined, his hair white as winter snow, but his eyes were sharp and clear, missing nothing. He spoke in Apache, and Ayanna answered. The conversation went on for several minutes while Caleb stood quietly, holding the reins of his horse, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. Finally the old man switched to English, his accent heavy, but his words clear. "Nahimana says you saved her life. I found her dying. Did what anyone should do." "Not anyone would. Most white men would have ridden past." The old man studied Caleb with uncomfortable intensity. "I am Red Sky Walker, elder of the Chiricahua. Caleb Thornwood. You have bear scar." It was not a question. "Grizzly?" "Yes, 5 years ago." "Why you not kill bear before it marked you?" "I did kill it, but not before it got close enough to do that." Red Sky nodded as if this confirmed something he had suspected. "Bear was strong. You were strong. But Bear was also hungry, desperate. That made it dangerous." He moved closer, standing directly in front of Caleb. "When desperate, even good things become dangerous. Remember that, white man." It was a warning and a lesson, delivered with the weight of decades of wisdom. "You respect my granddaughter?" "With my life." Red Sky Walker studied him for a long moment more. Then he nodded. Permission granted. That evening, as the sun set and turned the canyon walls the color of blood, Red Sky Walker performed a brief ceremony. Smoke from sacred herbs rose into the still air. He prayed in Apache, words that Caleb could not understand but whose meaning was clear in their cadence and tone. Blessing, protection, guidance for a dangerous journey. When the ceremony ended, Red Sky spoke to Ayanna in front of the assembled people. "Your path is fire. You will burn, but not be consumed. From ash comes new growth." He turned to Caleb. "You think you hide in mountains from your past, but past follows like shadow. Only way to be free is to face it." The words struck Caleb with unexpected force. This old man, who had known him for mere hours, had seen through to the core of why he had fled to the mountains 8 years ago. Red Sky's final words were directed at both of them. White man's law and Apache justice are not the same. But truth? Truth is truth in all languages. He looked at Ayanna with fierce pride. "Speak your truth loudly, granddaughter. The spirits will carry your voice." They left at dawn, their supplies replenished, their spirits lifted by the blessing of the elder. Caleb had expected to feel uncomfortable in the Apache camp, to be seen as an enemy. Instead, he had been treated with cautious respect, judged by his actions rather than his heritage. It gave him hope that the world could change, that bridges could be built, as Ayanna's father had believed. 3 days later. Ridge above Tucson. The town spread below them, larger than Caleb remembered from his last visit years ago. Buildings clustered around a central plaza, streets laid out in rough grid, church spires rising above the adobe and wood structures. Smoke from hundreds of cook fires hazed the air. Civilization, safety, or the illusion of it. "It's bigger than I remembered," Ayanna said quietly. "More people, more witnesses. That's good." Caleb handed her his coat, the heavy leather one he wore in winter. "Keep the hood up until we're inside the marshal's office. Less chance of recognition." They rode slowly into town, joining the flow of traffic. Freight wagons loaded with supplies. Cowboys driving small herds to market. Women with baskets, heading to or from the general store. People glanced at them, noting the mountain man and his hooded companion, but in a border town strange sights were common enough. The marshal's office sat near the plaza, a solid adobe building with barred windows and a sign that read, Federal Marshal, Arizona Territory. They were perhaps 50 yards away when a man stepped into the street in front of them. Dakota Jim, the bounty hunter from the trail weeks ago. "Well, well, Caleb Thornwood, heard you had yourself some interesting company." Caleb's hand moved toward his revolver, slow and deliberate. Beside him, Ayanna froze. $1,000 is a lot of money, Thornwood. She's innocent, framed by Brennan. Don't care. Money's money. They stood in the street, two men facing each other while a crowd began to gather. This was the kind of confrontation that people remembered, that they would talk about in saloons for years. The tension stretched, tight as a rope about to snap. Then a new voice cut through, authoritative and loud. "Hold on there. If that woman is who I think she is, she needs medical examination before any arrest." An older man pushed through the growing crowd. He was perhaps 60, silver-haired, wearing a doctor's black coat. He carried a medical bag and the air of a man used to being obeyed. "Doc Henderson," Caleb said, recognizing him from years past. "Thornwood. Figured that was you under all that hair." Doc turned to Dakota Jim. "Now you want that bounty? You follow proper procedure. This woman's been beaten, near as I can see even from here. That needs documenting before anyone goes arresting anybody." "Why?" Dakota Jim's hand stayed near his gun. "Because if she's been beaten like I suspect, and if it was Brennan's men who did it, that's evidence tampering if we don't document her injuries now, before they heal any more." Doc looked at Ayanna directly. "Miss, will you consent to examination? In front of witnesses, proper and legal?" Ayanna looked at Caleb. He gave a small nod. This was their chance. "Yes." "Then I'm taking her to my clinic." Doc's voice rose, addressing the crowd. "Federal Marshal can meet us there. Proper procedure, everything legal and witnessed." He turned to Dakota Jim. "And you can wait outside like a civilized person." The crowd murmured approval. Dakota Jim, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, had no choice but to accept. He stepped back, angry but contained. Doc Henderson took Ayanna's arm gently. "Come with me, miss. Let's get you looked at proper." As they walked toward his clinic, Caleb following close behind, Doc spoke quietly. "You picked a hell of a fight, Thornwood." "Didn't pick it, it picked me. Brennan's got power, money, friends in high places. She's got the truth. Sometimes that's enough." Doc glanced back at him, something like approval in his eyes. "Let's hope you're right." The clinic was clean and well lit, with examination rooms in the back. Doc Henderson directed Ayanna behind a curtain, maintaining her modesty while he examined her injuries. Marshal Theodore Garrett arrived within minutes, a stern-faced man in his 50s who listened more than he spoke. From behind the curtain, Doc called out his findings as he discovered them. 3 healed rib fractures, multiple contusions in various stages of healing, defensive wounds on hands and forearms, consistent with fighting back against an attacker. A pause. Facial trauma, healing well but significant. Pattern consistent with repeated blows intended to cause serious harm or death. The marshal wrote everything down in a leather-bound notebook. When Doc finished and Ayanna emerged, dressed again and composed despite the ordeal of examination, Garrett studied her carefully. "Miss, can you identify who did this to you?" 4 men, led by Sergeant Luther Hayes, under direct orders from Captain Marcus Brennan. "You're accusing a U.S. Army Indian agent of attempted murder. I'm accusing him of theft, embezzlement, the murder of Silas Whitmore, and yes, the attempted murder of myself." The room fell silent. These were serious charges. Career-ending, life-ending, if proven. Doc Henderson emerged from behind the curtain, wiping his hands on a towel. Her injuries support her story. This wasn't robbery gone wrong. This was execution that failed. Marshal Garrett turned his attention to Caleb. "And who are you in all this?" "The man who found her dying on a trail. I have no stake except seeing justice done." The marshal's eyes narrowed. "You're Thornwood, the scout who disappeared after Sand Creek." "I left the Army, didn't disappear." "Fair enough." Garrett closed his notebook. "Miss, I'll investigate your claims. But understand, Captain Brennan is a powerful man. I'll need more than your testimony." "I have more." Ayanna's voice was steady, certain. "I have photographic memory. Every transaction from Brennan's ledgers. Dates, amounts, names, everything." Marshal Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Photographic memory? That's quite a claim." "Test me." And so she did. For the next 2 hours, seated in the marshal's office with a stenographer recording every word, Ayanna recited details from memory. Months of transactions, specific amounts, fake company names, patterns of theft that stretched back 3 years. Her recall was perfect, unwavering, detailed beyond what any normal person could manage. By the time she finished, both the marshal and his stenographer sat in stunned silence. Outside, word had spread. Apache families from the reservation began arriving in Tucson. They had heard that Ayanna was alive, that she was speaking truth to power. They came to bear witness, to add their voices to hers. As the sun set on Tucson that evening, the pieces were falling into place. Truth was being spoken. Justice was beginning, however slowly, to turn its great wheels. But 30 miles outside town, Captain Marcus Brennan sat in his command tent, surrounded by maps and plans. 50 soldiers waited for his orders, and in his eyes burned the desperate light of a man who would do anything, sacrifice anyone, to protect what he had built on lies and theft. The final confrontation was coming, and it would test them all. The night before Ayanna's public testimony, Tucson held its breath. Word had spread through the town like wildfire. An Apache woman accused a U.S. Army captain of corruption and murder. She claimed she could prove it. Tomorrow, in front of witnesses, she would speak. In the hotel room that Marshal Garrett had secured for them, Caleb stood at the window, watching the street below. His Sharps rifle leaned against the wall within easy reach. His revolver sat on the table, cleaned and loaded. He had checked every sight line, every rooftop, every alley that offered a clear shot at their door. Behind him, Ayanna paced. 3 steps, one direction, turn, 3 steps back. Her hands moved restlessly, touching her medicine pouch, clasping together, separating again. What if I forget? What if when I stand up there in front of everyone, the words don't come? Caleb turned from the window. In the lamplight she looked small and vulnerable, nothing like the fierce survivor who had climbed mountains and faced down bounty hunters. "You won't forget. You've remembered every detail for 2 weeks straight, under conditions that would break most people." He moved closer. "You've got this. What if he kills me before I testify? Then he'll have to go through me first." Caleb's voice was flat, absolute. "And I don't die easy." Ayanna stopped pacing, looked up at him. In that moment, standing close in the small room, something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement that what had begun as stranger helping stranger had become something deeper. "Why are you doing all this? You don't owe me anything." Caleb was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe I'm not doing it for you. Maybe I'm doing it so I can sleep at night again." He paused. "But also, you're worth fighting for. Any fool can see that." Ayanna stepped closer still, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could smell the sage she used to wash her hair. "Thank you, Caleb Thornwood, for seeing me as a person, not just Apache or victim. Thank you for reminding me why I came down from that mountain." They stood there, the space between them charged with possibility. Then Ayanna stepped back, breaking the moment before it could become something neither was ready for. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be long." "You too." But neither slept much that night. Caleb remained at the window, watching. Ayanna lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing in her mind the testimony she would give. Outside, the town settled into an uneasy quiet. And 30 miles away, Captain Marcus Brennan gave his final orders to 50 armed men. Morning came with church bells. The courthouse sat at the center of Tucson's plaza, a 2-story adobe building with thick walls and narrow windows. By 8 in the morning, a crowd had gathered. Apache families from the reservation, town merchants, cowboys and miners. Even Dakota Jim, the bounty hunter, stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression thoughtful. Inside the hotel room, Marshal Garrett arrived with 6 deputies. "Miss Ayanna, you'll walk between my men. The courthouse is 300 yards. I've positioned sharpshooters on the roofs." Caleb pulled on his coat, checked his weapons one final time. "Not enough. Brennan has 50 soldiers camped outside town. If he brings the army into Tucson, he's starting a war. Even he wouldn't risk that." "You sure about that?" Garrett's expression suggested he was not sure at all. As they prepared to leave, a sound rose from the street below. Voices, many of them. Caleb looked out to see the crowd had grown and, more importantly, had organized itself. Sam Carter stood there, his face still bruised from Brennan's beating but his back straight. Doc Henderson beside him. Red Sky Walker, who must have ridden through the night to be here. Apache elders, town merchants, even women with their children, come to witness justice. Dakota Jim pushed forward through the crowd. He looked up at the hotel window, saw Caleb watching, and called out, "Reckon I was wrong about the reward, Thornwood. Lady's innocent. I'll walk with her to that courthouse." Others in the crowd nodded, called out agreement. The mood was shifting, crystallizing into something powerful and unexpected. Community. Solidarity. The recognition that this was everyone's fight. Marshal Garrett looked at the gathering crowd and shook his head in wonder. "I'll be damned, they're forming a protective cordon." By the time they emerged from the hotel, more than 100 people had gathered. They arranged themselves in a human shield around Ayanna, men and women both, creating a protective barrier of bodies between her and any potential threat. Sam Carter pushed through to speak directly to Caleb. "We're tired of corrupt officials. This ends today." "This isn't your fight, Sam." "The hell it isn't. This is everyone's fight." The walk to the courthouse became a procession. Ayanna in the center, protected by layers of citizens who had decided that truth mattered more than fear. The crowd chanted as they walked, a single word repeated over and over. "Justice, justice, justice." The sound echoed off the adobe walls, rolled across the plaza like thunder. Caleb walked at Ayanna's right shoulder, his eyes constantly moving, watching for threats. His hand never strayed far from his revolver. They were halfway across the plaza when the shot rang out. The crack of a rifle split the morning air. The crowd screamed, people diving for cover. Caleb shoved Ayanna down, his body covering hers, expecting the impact of a bullet. But the shot had missed, or been a warning. The bullet struck the adobe wall of a building, spraying fragments but hurting no one. Caleb spotted the shooter. A rooftop, 3 buildings over, a man with a rifle, silhouetted against the morning sky. He recognized the stance, the hat, even at this distance. Captain Marcus Brennan. "Stand aside," Brennan's voice carried across the plaza. "That woman is a wanted criminal." Caleb pulled Ayanna to her feet, got her behind the cover of a water trough. His hands moved with the speed of long practice, bringing up his Sharps rifle, finding the target. He fired. The heavy rifle boomed, its recoil jarring his shoulder. On the rooftop, Brennan ducked, pieces of the parapet exploding near his head. Brennan returned fire. His bullet struck the water trough, punching through wood, sending water spraying. The crowd scattered, people running for cover, but many stayed, forming a human wall between Ayanna and the shooter. Marshal Garrett's voice rose above the chaos. "Brennan, come down and face charges." "I am the law here." "Not anymore." A new sound cut through the confusion. Hoofbeats, coming fast. A single rider galloping into the plaza with reckless speed. Sergeant Luther Hayes. His uniform was dusty, his face haggard. He pulled his horse to a sliding stop in front of the courthouse steps. "Brennan's lying," Luther's shout carried across the plaza. "I'm testifying against him. I have evidence, copies of ledgers he thought he destroyed." He threw a leather saddlebag toward Marshal Garrett. It landed at the lawman's feet, spilling papers. On the rooftop, Brennan's face twisted with rage and betrayal. "You traitor!" He swung his rifle toward Luther, fired. The bullet caught Luther in the shoulder, spinning him, dropping him from his horse, but not killing him. Luther hit the ground hard, clutching his wounded shoulder, but alive. The sight of a U.S. Army captain shooting one of his own men in broad daylight shocked even the hardened frontier crowd. This was the line that could not be crossed. This was murder attempted in front of hundreds of witnesses. Some of Brennan's own soldiers, who had been positioned around the plaza, began lowering their weapons. They had signed up to protect settlers, to keep the peace, not to murder women and shoot their own sergeants in the back. A young soldier, barely 20, called up to the rooftop, "Sir, stand down. You're under arrest." Brennan's response was incoherent rage. He fired again, wildly, hitting nothing. His world was crumbling, his carefully constructed empire of corruption collapsing in real time. And then Ayanna did something that no one expected. She stood up, stepped out from behind the water trough, walked into the open plaza where everyone could see her. Caleb lunged to pull her back, but she shook off his hand. Her voice, when she spoke, carried clear and strong. "Captain Brennan, you want to shoot me? Here I am." The plaza fell silent. Every eye turned to her. "You tried to kill me because I spoke truth. You starved my people, stole from children and elders, murdered Silas Whitmore because he was honest." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "You say you built this territory? You built it on lies and theft." She stood alone in the center of that plaza, one small woman facing a man with a rifle who wanted her dead, but her voice carried a power that weapons could not match. "Today, the truth stands taller than your corruption." The crowd erupted, not in violence but in sound, cheering, supporting, witnessing. The power of community rising up to say that this woman, this truth, mattered more than fear. Brennan, seeing his world end, made his final desperate choice. He aimed his rifle at Ayanna's heart. His finger tightened on the trigger. Caleb moved. Faster than should have been possible for a man his size, he threw himself between Ayanna and the rifle. The shot came. The bullet struck him high in the shoulder, the impact spinning him, dropping him to his knees. But before Brennan could fire again, a Federal cavalry sharpshooter, positioned by Marshal Garrett hours earlier, took his shot. The rifle cracked once. On the rooftop, Brennan jerked, his weapon falling from his hands. He staggered backward, out of sight. The plaza exploded into motion. Deputies rushing toward the building where Brennan had been. Doc Henderson running to where Caleb had fallen, Ayanna already kneeling beside him. Luther Hayes being helped to his feet by townspeople who moments before would have arrested him. Caleb lay on his back, breathing hard, blood spreading across his buckskin jacket. Ayanna pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "You're a fool, Caleb Thornwood." "Been called worse." His voice was tight with pain, but he managed something like a smile. "You hurt?" "No, because you stepped in front of the bullet meant for me. Seemed like the thing to do." Doc Henderson arrived, took over the medical care with practiced efficiency. "Bullet went clean through, missed the bone. You'll live, you stubborn mountain man." On the rooftop of the building, deputies found Captain Marcus Brennan. The sharpshooter's bullet had struck him in the side, a serious wound, but not immediately fatal. He lay there, defeated, broken, bleeding. As they carried him down to face justice, he muttered one phrase over and over. "I did it for my family. They took my family." Marshal Garrett looked down at him without sympathy. "And you took food from hundreds of families. Difference is, they were innocent." 3 hours later. The courthouse. Doc Henderson had patched both Caleb and Luther Hayes. Neither wound was life-threatening, though both men would carry scars. They sat in the courthouse now, along with what seemed like half of Tucson, waiting for the proceedings to begin. Judge Harrison, brought in from Santa Fe specifically for this case, took his seat. He was an old man, 70 if he was a day, but his eyes were sharp and his reputation for fairness was legendary. "This is a preliminary hearing," he announced, "to determine if sufficient evidence exists to bind Captain Marcus Brennan over for trial on charges of embezzlement, corruption, and murder." For the next 4 hours, testimony was heard. Ayanna spoke first, her photographic memory laying out the pattern of theft in devastating detail. Luther Hayes testified next, his confession laying bare the machinery of corruption. Apache elders spoke of promised supplies that never arrived, of children who went hungry while Brennan grew rich. Doc Henderson presented his medical findings regarding Ayanna's injuries. Sam Carter testified about being beaten for helping her. Even Dakota Jim took the stand, admitting he had been hired to hunt her down but had come to believe in her innocence. The evidence was overwhelming. By the time the sun set, Judge Harrison had made his ruling. "Captain Marcus Brennan, I find sufficient cause to bind you over for trial on all charges. You will be held without bail pending trial in Santa Fe." He paused. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate audit of all Indian Agency accounts in Arizona Territory, and I am dismissing all charges against Miss Ayanna with prejudice." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Ayanna closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to believe it was real. Justice. Actual justice. Caleb, his shoulder bandaged and his arm in a sling, reached over with his good hand and squeezed hers. No words were needed. That evening. Hotel room. The celebration in the streets below continued, but in the quiet of the hotel room, exhaustion finally claimed them both. Caleb sat in a chair by the window, his wounded shoulder throbbing despite the laudanum Doc had given him. Ayanna sat on the bed, watching him. "You took a bullet for me. Seemed appropriate. You'd taken several already. I'm serious. So am I." He turned to look at her. "You asked me once why I was doing all this. Truth is, I didn't know at first. Thought maybe I was trying to make up for Sand Creek, for all the times I didn't act when I should have." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about my past and started being about your future. About making sure you lived to build those bridges your father talked about." Ayanna stood, crossed the room, knelt in front of his chair so they were eye level. "I would have died on that trail if you hadn't found me. I would have died a dozen times since then if you hadn't protected me." She took his hand in both of hers. "You gave me my life back. How do I repay that?" "You already did. You reminded me what it means to stand for something, to be part of something bigger than yourself." They stayed like that for a long moment, hands clasped, looking into each other's eyes. Then Ayanna stood, stepped back, practical even in this emotional moment. "Tomorrow, I meet with the new Indian agent. Start rebuilding trust between my people and the government. You'll be good at it. Natural bridge builder. And you?" She tried to keep her voice casual. "Back to your mountain?" Caleb was quiet. The mountain had been his refuge for 8 years. His escape from a world that had disappointed him, that he had disappointed. But sitting here, wounded from protecting someone who mattered to him, having been part of something important, something right, the mountain felt less necessary than it once had. "Maybe. Eventually." He looked at her. "But that new Indian agent will need protection. Brennan had friends, people who benefited from his corruption. They won't be happy about the changes coming. Are you volunteering?" "Might be." Ayanna smiled, genuine and warm. 30 miles from Fort Grant to Sangre de Cristo. That's a reasonable distance." "For visiting? Or for not being alone anymore?" Caleb felt something in his chest ease, a tension he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. The possibility of connection, of partnership, of maybe, eventually, something more. "Partners?" he asked. Partners, she confirmed. They did not kiss, did not embrace, just shook hands, firm and equal, two survivors who had found in each other something worth fighting for. Outside, the celebration continued. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. Brennan would face trial. The corruption he had built would be dismantled piece by piece. Ayanna would work to rebuild trust between her people and the government that had failed them. And Caleb Thornwood, the mountain man who had hidden from the world for 8 years, would find that sometimes the bravest thing is not running away, but standing beside someone and facing the future together. The mountain would wait. It always did. But for now, there was work to be done in the valleys below. 3 months passed like water flowing through canyon stone, steady, persistent, reshaping the landscape one day at a time. Santa Fe witnessed the trial of Captain Marcus Brennan in November, when the air turned crisp and the cottonwoods shed their golden leaves. The courthouse filled every day with spectators who came to see justice served. Apache families traveled hundreds of miles to bear witness. Newspaper reporters from as far as San Francisco filled the press gallery, their pens scratching furiously as testimony unfolded. The prosecution presented ledgers that Luther Hayes had copied and hidden, bank records showing unexplained deposits into accounts under false names, testimony from merchants who had been paid for supplies they never delivered, supplies that existed only on paper while Apache children went hungry. Ayanna testified for 2 full days. Her photographic memory proved devastating to Brennan's defense. She recited numbers, dates, amounts with perfect accuracy. When the defense attorney tried to trip her up, asking about entries from 2 years prior, she answered without hesitation. Every detail matched the ledgers exactly. On the witness stand, Brennan cut a diminished figure. The confident officer was gone, replaced by a broken man who muttered about justice and revenge. His defense was that he had acted out of grief, that the Apache raid that killed his family had driven him to seek compensation in whatever form he could take it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 25 years hard labor at the territorial prison in Yuma. $80,000 in restitution to be paid to the Apache reservation. Disgrace, ruin, the complete collapse of everything he had built on theft and lies. When the verdict was read, Brennan showed no emotion. Before they left Santa Fe, Ayanna visited the Apache cemetery. A simple wooden marker bore Dakota's name, placed there by his mother who had survived. Ayanna knelt, placed sage and turquoise at the grave. "Brother, your sacrifice brought justice. Mother is well. Our people are healing. You rest now." Caleb stood behind her, silent respect for a brave man he had known for only minutes, but would remember forever. He simply stared ahead, already gone to some interior place where the world could no longer reach him. Ayanna sat in the courtroom gallery beside Caleb, who wore his one good suit, looking profoundly uncomfortable but present. When the judge's gavel fell, she did not cheer or cry. She simply closed her eyes and breathed deeply, as if releasing something she had carried for too long. Before they left Santa Fe, Ayanna visited the Apache cemetery. A simple wooden marker bore Dakota's name, placed there by his mother who had survived. Ayanna knelt, placed sage and turquoise at the grave. "Brother, your sacrifice brought justice. Mother is well. Our people are healing. You rest now." Caleb stood behind her, silent respect for a brave man he had known for only minutes, but would remember forever. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Questions came in a barrage. "Miss Ayanna, how does it feel to bring down such a powerful man? What message does this send about corruption in the territories? Will you continue working with the Indian Agency?" Caleb stepped between Ayanna and the worst of the crowd, his size and demeanor creating space. She answered what questions she chose, declined others with polite firmness. Finally, Marshal Garrett intervened, clearing a path for them to reach their wagon. As they rode away from Santa Fe toward Fort Grant, the November sun warm despite the season, Ayanna spoke quietly. It's strange. I thought I would feel different when it was over. Triumphant, maybe. Or satisfied. What do you feel? Caleb asked, guiding the horses with practiced ease despite his healing shoulder. Tired and sad. Brennan destroyed himself as much as he tried to destroy me. She paused. His daughter really was killed in that raid. I looked into it. Emily Brennan, 6 years old, died in 1869. That part was true. Doesn't excuse what he did. No, but it explains it. How grief can poison everything if you let it. Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own grief, his own years of self-imposed exile in the mountains. Maybe that's the lesson. Grief can make you hide, or it can make you hurt others, but neither one heals the wound. So what does heal it? Choosing to build something instead of destroying, choosing to connect instead of isolating. He glanced at her. Choosing to save someone's life instead of taking one. She understood he was talking about more than Brennan now, about himself, about the choice he had made on a dusty trail 3 months ago that had changed both their lives. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For choosing to build with me. Fort Grant. December 1877. The new Indian agent was a man named William Crawford, 50 years old, a former missionary who spoke Apache and Spanish. He had served in similar positions in New Mexico and had a reputation for honesty that was rare in government service. His first act was to conduct a complete inventory of all supplies designated for the reservation. What he found confirmed everything Ayanna had testified to. Shortages everywhere, promises unkept, a system designed to fail the people it was meant to serve. His second act was to hire Ayanna as his official interpreter and advisor on Apache affairs. She accepted, with conditions. She would speak truth, even when it was uncomfortable. She would advocate for her people, even when it conflicted with government policy. And she would not compromise her integrity for any amount of money or security. Crawford agreed without hesitation. That's exactly why I need you. I don't want someone who tells me what I want to hear. I want someone who tells me what I need to know. By January, supplies began flowing properly to the reservation. Real supplies in the amounts promised. Beef for protein, flour and corn for bread, blankets for the cold mountain winters, medicine for the sick. It was basic, minimal, but it was honest. Ayanna visited the reservation weekly, translating between Crawford and the tribal leaders. She saw the difference immediately in the faces of the children. Better fed, warmer, healthier. It was a small victory, but victories came in all sizes. Red Skywalker took her aside during one visit, his old eyes studying her carefully. You carry yourself differently now, granddaughter. Lighter. The burden is shared now. I don't carry it alone. The mountain man, he is good to you? Ayanna smiled. He is stubborn and sometimes impossible. But yes, he is good to me. You love him? The question, direct in the Apache way, made her pause. Did she love Caleb? The word seemed too small for what had grown between them. Trust, respect, partnership, affection, the comfort of silence shared, the joy of conversation about nothing and everything. I think I might, she said finally. Red Sky nodded, satisfied. Good. Love that grows slowly is love that lasts. Caleb's cabin, February 1878. Winter gripped the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in fists of ice and snow. The cabin that had housed one man alone for 8 years now showed signs of 2 people living in careful partnership. Ayanna had her own space, a corner where she kept her weaving loom and her medicine pouches. She had insisted on building a small addition to the cabin, a private room with a door that could close, proper and respectable. Caleb had helped with the construction, the 2 of them working through the fall to get it finished before the worst of the winter set in. They lived as partners, not as husband and wife, shared meals and conversation and the work of mountain living, but maintained boundaries, propriety, the careful distance of two people who were not quite ready to acknowledge what was growing between them. Caleb taught her to track game in snow, to read weather in the behavior of birds, to skin a deer cleanly. She taught him Apache words and phrases, the proper way to prepare traditional foods, the stories her grandmother had told her about the old days before the white men came in great numbers. On cold evenings they sat by the fire, Caleb carving wood or mending trap lines, while Ayanna wove blankets on her loom. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in companionable silence. Both were comfortable in their own way. One night in late February, with wind howling outside and snow piling against the walls, Ayanna set aside her weaving and looked at Caleb across the fire. "Do you ever regret it? Coming down from the mountain for me?" Caleb set down the trap he had been repairing. The question deserved his full attention. "No, not once." He paused, searching for the right words. "I thought I was happy up here alone, thought I had found peace, but I was wrong. I had found hiding, not peace. And now? Now I'm building something instead of running from something. That's different." She nodded slowly. "Crawford asked me to work full-time at Fort Grant. Said he wants to establish a proper school for Apache children, teach them to read and write in both English and Apache." Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. Fort Grant was 60 miles away. Full-time work meant living there, not here. "What did you tell him?" "I said I would think about it." She met his eyes directly. "It's important work. Could change the future for my people's children." "It is important. You should do it." "But this is 30 miles from the fort, not 60. And 30 miles is a reasonable distance for someone to travel regularly." He stood, moved to the window where snow obscured the view. His voice, when he spoke again, was careful. "I've been thinking. This cabin is small, but the land is good. Could build a larger house, closer to the trail to Fort Grant. Make the journey easier." Ayanna stood as well, her heart beginning to beat faster. This was as close as Caleb came to speaking emotions directly. "Why would you build a larger house?" "Because this one is too small for two people long-term." He turned to face her. "And because if you're going to be traveling regularly to Fort Grant, you'll need a home base. A real home, not just a trapper's cabin." "Is that what you want? For this to be my home base?" Caleb crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her. For a big man, he could move with surprising gentleness. He took her hands in his, calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "I want more than that. I want this to be our home, not yours or mine. Ours." "Caleb Thornwood, are you proposing to me?" "I'm proposing partnership, living together as husband and wife, properly married in whatever way you choose. Apache ceremony, Christian church, both, neither. I don't care about the formalities." He paused, and something vulnerable showed in his eyes. "I care about building a life with you, about facing whatever comes next together instead of alone." Ayanna felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that come from hope rather than grief. "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, you stubborn mountain man. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will build a life with you." She squeezed his hands. "But we do both ceremonies, Apache and Christian, honor both our heritages." Caleb smiled, that rare full smile that transformed his bearded face. "Both ceremonies it is." He pulled her close then, carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. She leaned into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his arms around her, the safety that came from being with someone who had proven again and again that he would stand beside her through anything. April 1878. The wedding. Spring came to Arizona with explosive color. Wildflowers carpeted the valleys, trees burst into green, rivers ran high with snowmelt, and in a meadow halfway between Caleb's mountain cabin and Fort Grant, 2 ceremonies took place on the same day. In the morning, Red Sky Walker performed the Apache ceremony. Ayanna wore traditional dress, white deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork. Caleb wore buckskins, his beard trimmed but still full, his long hair tied back. The ceremony involved corn pollen, prayers to the four directions, blessing from the elders. When Red Sky pronounced them joined in the Apache way, the assembled tribe sang songs that had been sung at weddings for generations beyond counting. It was beautiful and ancient and connected them to something larger than themselves. In the afternoon, a circuit-riding preacher performed the Christian ceremony. Ayanna changed into a simple white dress that she and the women of Tucson had sewn together. Caleb wore his one good suit, looking uncomfortable but determined. They exchanged rings, simple silver bands that Caleb had traded for at Sam Carter's store. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Doc Henderson and Sam Carter cheered. Marshall Garrett, who had become a friend, threw his hat in the air. Even Dakota Jim, who had come to respect both of them, applauded. Sam Carter, now 70, stood with his grandson's Apache wife beside him. The bruises Brennan had given him were long healed, but the memory of his courage remained. When he caught Caleb's eye, he raised his glass in silent salute. Some debts, his gesture said, were repaid simply by seeing justice done. The celebration afterward mixed both cultures: Apache fry bread and venison, beef stew and cornbread, music from guitars and Apache drums, dancing that combined frontier reels with traditional Apache rhythms. As the sun set and turned the mountains red and gold, Caleb and Ayanna slipped away from the celebration. They walked to a ridge overlooking the valley, standing close, his arm around her shoulders. "Mrs. Thornwood," he said, testing the name. "Mrs. Ayanna Thornwood," she corrected. "I'm keeping both names. Bridge between worlds, remember?" "Wouldn't have it any other way." They stood in silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Behind them, the celebration continued. Ahead of them, a future neither had imagined 6 months ago. "What do you think comes next?" Ayanna asked. "Building that house. You working with Crawford on the school. Me keeping you safe from anyone who doesn't like the changes you're making." "That's the practical answer. But what do you really think?" Caleb considered. "I think we build something that lasts. Not just a house, but a life. Maybe someday children to teach, to pass on what we've learned." "Children?" "If we're blessed that way. Apache and white, carrying both heritages. Bridge builders, like their mother." Ayanna leaned her head against his shoulder. "I like that future." "So do I." Stars began appearing in the darkening sky, thousands of them in the clear mountain air. "Those who wait forever," Ayanna had called them, witnesses to all that happened below. Tonight they witnessed two people from different worlds, thrown together by violence and chance, choosing to build something together, choosing love over fear, choosing partnership over isolation, choosing to believe that bridges could be built, that understanding could replace hatred, that the future did not have to repeat the failures of the past. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of history. Two people, one marriage, one life built together. But small victories mattered. They were the foundation on which larger changes were built. In the meadow below, the celebration continued long into the night, songs and laughter rising to the stars, a community of Apache and white coming together to honor a union that represented hope for something better. And on the ridge above, Caleb and Ayanna stood together, watching the stars emerge one by one, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. The mountain man had come down from his isolation. The Apache woman had spoken her truth. And together they had found something neither expected, but both needed. Home, partnership, love. The journey that began with cruelty and violence had ended with hope and possibility. That was worth celebrating. That was worth building on. That was worth fighting to protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the work of building Crawford's school, opposition from those who benefited from the old corrupt system. The slow, difficult work of healing generations of mistrust and hatred. But tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight was for celebration, for joy, for the simple pleasure of standing beside someone who had proven again and again that they would stand beside you no matter what came. "Ready to go back down?" Caleb asked eventually. "Not yet. Let's stay here a little longer. Just us and the stars." "Whatever you want, Mrs. Thornwood." She smiled. "I'm going to enjoy hearing you say that for the next 50 years. "Good, because I plan on saying it for at least that long." They stood together as darkness claimed the valley and the stars filled the sky. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds. Two people who had chosen to build instead of destroy, to connect instead of isolate, to love instead of hate. The story that began with a woman dying on a trail and a man willing to stop and help had become something neither could have imagined: a partnership, a marriage, a foundation for a future built on hope rather than fear. And that, more than any trial or testimony, was the real victory. That was what would last. That was what would matter when everything else faded into history. Love, partnership, the choice to stand together. That was justice. That was redemption. That was home. 10 years later. Spring 1888. The house that Caleb built stood on a rise overlooking the valley between the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and the trail to Fort Grant. It was larger than the old cabin, with 3 rooms and a covered porch that caught the evening breeze. Corrals held horses and a few cattle. Gardens, tended mostly by Ayanna, grew vegetables that thrived in the mountain soil. From the porch you could see 20 miles in any direction. Safe country, home country, built with love and labor over a decade of partnership. Caleb sat in his chair, whittling a piece of pine into a toy horse. His beard was fuller now, shot through with gray. Lines creased his face deeper than before, earned from sun and years and laughter. His hands, still strong despite being 54 years old, worked the wood with practiced ease. Inside, Ayanna worked at her loom. At 37, she had grown into her role as educator and advocate. The school she and Crawford had built now served 40 Apache children. She taught them reading, writing, mathematics, and history in both English and Apache. Teaching the future, one child at a time. But today was special. Today, their daughter was returning. Nita Thornwood, 9 years old, came running up the trail from where the wagon had dropped her. Her black hair, long like her mother's, streamed behind her. Her face, showing features from both parents, split into a wide grin when she saw her father on the porch. "Papa!" Caleb set down his whittling and stood, opening his arms just in time to catch her as she launched herself at him. He lifted her easily, swinging her around once before setting her down. "How was your week at the reservation with grandmother?" "Amazing! Red Sky Walker taught me about tracking. I found a deer trail all by myself." Ayanna emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She knelt to embrace her daughter, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her safe return. "Did you thank Red Sky Walker properly?" "Yes, Mama, and I helped grandmother with her weaving. She said I'm getting better." "Good. Now wash up. Dinner will be ready soon." As Nita ran inside, Caleb and Ayanna exchanged a look. 10 years of marriage had given them a language beyond words. The look said, "Our daughter is growing up strong. She walks in both worlds with confidence. We are doing something right." That evening, after Nita had been fed and sent to bed with her new toy horse, Caleb and Ayanna sat on the porch as they did most nights. The ritual of coffee and quiet conversation while the day faded into darkness. "Doc Henderson came by the school today," Ayanna said. "He's getting older, talking about retiring, moving to California to be near his son." "Who'll replace him?" "He's training a young doctor from back east. Woman, actually. First female doctor Arizona Territory has seen." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "The territory's evolving fast." "It is. The railroad reached Tucson last year. More people coming west every month. The territory won't be territory much longer. Statehood is coming, maybe 5 years, maybe 10. How do you feel about that? Ayanna was quiet, considering. Mixed. More people means more pressure on Apache lands, but also more witnesses, more people who might demand justice. It's complicated. Most important things are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge. A coyote called in the distance, answered by another miles away. The eternal conversation of the desert night. I received a letter today, Ayanna said eventually, from Luther Hayes. Caleb turned to look at her. They had not heard from the former sergeant in years, not since he testified at Brennan's trial and then disappeared to rebuild his life elsewhere. What did he say? He's married now, living in Colorado, working as a deputy sheriff. She paused. He wanted us to know that Brennan died in prison last month. Pneumonia. Caleb absorbed this information without visible reaction. How do you feel about that? Nothing. Is that wrong? I thought I would feel something. Relief, maybe, or sadness. But I just feel nothing. He was already gone, in the ways that mattered. Dead in prison or dead in his cell. What's the difference? I suppose. Ayanna set down her coffee cup. Luther also said he thinks about that day in the plaza often. Said it changed him, seeing all those people stand up for truth. Made him want to be better. Good can come from bad situations, if people choose it. Is that what happened to us? Good from bad? Caleb reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of a decade's practice. I think we chose to make good from bad. There's a difference. Summer 1890. The school. The Apache school had grown. What started as a single room now sprawled into 3 buildings. 60 children attended, learning not just English and arithmetic, but also traditional Apache skills and stories. It was Crawford's vision made real, supported by Ayanna's tireless work. On this particular afternoon, Ayanna taught history to the older children. She spoke in English, but Apache words and phrases peppered her teaching. The students, ranging from 12 to 16 years old, listened with the intensity of young people beginning to understand their place in larger stories. Your grandparents lived through times of war and change, she said. They survived by being strong and adaptable, by learning new skills while keeping old wisdom. A boy in the back raised his hand. Miss Ayanna, my grandfather says the old ways are dying, that we're becoming white. It was a challenge disguised as a question. Ayanna had heard variations of it before. Are you becoming white by learning to read? She asked. Or are you gaining tools that let you defend your rights and understand the contracts the government makes you sign? She moved to the front of her desk, sitting on its edge in the informal way that encouraged open discussion. I speak 3 languages: English, Spanish, Apache. Does that make me less Apache? Or does it make me able to move between worlds and protect my people better? A girl near the front spoke up. My mother says you married a white man. Some people say that's betraying our people. The classroom went silent. This was the question that hovered unasked in many conversations. Ayanna met the girl's eyes directly. I married a good man who risked his life to save mine and fought beside me for justice. His skin is white, yes, but his heart is honorable. She paused. Judge people by their actions, not their bloodlines. That's wisdom that transcends any culture. The girl nodded slowly, satisfied. After class, as Ayanna gathered her teaching materials, Crawford appeared in the doorway. He was older now, his missionary zeal tempered by a decade of practical experience, but his commitment to the work remained absolute. You handled that question about Caleb well. It's not the first time I've heard it, won't be the last. Does it bother you, the criticism from some quarters? Ayanna considered. 10 years ago, yes. Now? I know what Caleb and I have built together. I know the life we've made, the daughter we're raising. That's real. The opinions of people who don't know us are just noise. Crawford smiled. You've become wise, Ayanna. The students are lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. They're the future, whether people realize it or not. Fall 1892. The gathering storm. Change was coming to Arizona territory, and not all of it was welcome. The railroad had brought prosperity, but also pressure. More settlers wanted more land. The reservation boundaries, supposedly permanent, were being questioned by politicians in Washington. Caleb heard about it from Sam Carter, who was now well into his 70s but still ran his trading post with iron determination. "They're talking about reducing the reservation by half," Sam said, shaking his head. "Opening it up for homesteading, like the treaty they signed 15 years ago doesn't mean anything." Caleb, in town to pick up supplies, felt old anger stirring. Can they do that? Legally? Government can do whatever it wants if enough people look the other way. Sam spat tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. "Someone needs to fight this." "Someone will." Caleb loaded flour and coffee into his wagon. "Ayanna's already organizing, getting Apache leaders together, writing letters to Washington, talking to newspaper editors." "That woman of yours is a force of nature." "That she is." When Caleb returned home, he found Ayanna at their kitchen table, surrounded by papers and letters. Her face showed the strain of too little sleep and too much worry. "How bad is it?" he asked, setting the supplies on the counter. "Bad. They have votes in Congress, powerful men who see Apache land as wasted if it's not being farmed by white settlers." "What do you need from me?" She looked up, gratitude in her eyes. After 12 years of marriage, she still appreciated that his first question was always how he could help, never whether she should stop. "I need to go to Washington, testify before Congress. Show them that Apache people are thriving on this land, that breaking the treaty would be breaking faith with people who have already sacrificed everything." "When do we leave?" "We? Caleb, this could take months. You hate cities. You barely tolerate towns." "I tolerate what I need to tolerate." He pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "You think I'm letting you go to Washington alone? Besides, you'll need someone to carry the bags and look intimidating." Despite her worry, Ayanna laughed. "Intimidating you can do." They left in November, taking Nita with them. It was a journey of 3 weeks by train, the first time any of them had traveled so far from Arizona. The cities they passed through grew larger and more crowded. St. Louis, Chicago, finally Washington, D.C., sprawling and powerful and foreign in every way that mattered. Ayanna testified before a congressional committee in December, speaking for 2 hours about Apache life, about the progress of the school, about the importance of honoring treaties. Caleb sat in the gallery, watching his wife command the room with nothing but her voice and her conviction. Some congressmen listened with respect. Others looked bored or hostile, their minds already made up. It was impossible to tell which way the vote would go. After the testimony, they walked the National Mall, Nita between them, holding both their hands. Snow fell lightly, transforming the monuments into something ethereal and temporary. "Did I do enough?" Ayanna asked. "You did everything you could. That's all anyone can do." "What if they vote to break the treaty anyway?" Caleb stopped walking, turned to face her. Behind them the Capitol dome rose white against the gray sky. "Then we fight the next battle, and the one after that. And we teach Nita to keep fighting when we're gone." He squeezed her hand. "You taught me that justice isn't something you win once and keep forever. It's something you fight for every single day." The vote came in January 1893. The treaty held. The reservation boundaries remained intact. It was a narrow victory, won by margins so thin that a few changed votes would have reversed it. But it was victory nonetheless. On the train ride back to Arizona, Nita asked her mother a question that had been building for weeks. "Mama, why do people hate us?" Ayanna and Caleb exchanged a look. They had known this question would come eventually. Nita was 12 now, old enough to understand complicated truths. "They don't hate you, sweetheart. They hate what they think you represent. Change, difference, challenge to the way they believe things should be. But that's not fair. No, it's not. Life often isn't fair, but that's why we fight to make it better. Caleb leaned forward. Nita, you're going to face people who don't like that you're both Apache and white. Some Apache will say you're not enough Apache. Some whites will say you're too Apache. You know what I say to that? What, Papa? I say you're exactly enough of everything you need to be. You're Nita Thornwood. You speak 3 languages. You can track a deer and solve mathematics problems. You know Apache wisdom and white man's science. That makes you stronger, not weaker. Nita thought about this, her young face serious. I'm both, like Mama. That makes me complete, exactly like your Mama. Spring 1895, coming full circle. Caleb turned 52 that April. His hair was more gray than brown now, his beard fully silver. His shoulder, where Brennan's bullet had struck 18 years ago, ached in cold weather. But he was still strong, still capable of the work that mountain living demanded. He was checking fence lines when he saw the rider approaching. A young Apache man, perhaps 20, riding hard and looking worried. Caleb recognized him as one of Ayana's former students. Mr. Thornwood, is Miss Ayana here? At the school. What's wrong? Trouble at the reservation. Some white settlers trying to take land, saying the boundary markers are wrong. It's getting bad. People are talking about fighting. Caleb's expression went hard. Stay here. I'll get Ayana, and we'll ride out together. Within 30 minutes, they were on the trail. The situation at the reservation was exactly as the young man had described. 20 armed settlers, claiming that a surveying error meant a valuable water source was actually on public land, not reservation land. Apache men gathering to defend what was theirs. Both sides angry, armed, one spark away from violence. Red Sky Walker, now 90 years old and frail but still commanding respect, stood between the two groups, arms raised, calling for calm. But his voice carried less weight with people who had not grown up knowing him. Ayana rode directly into the space between the groups. Caleb followed, positioning himself so his presence was noticed but not threatening. Both groups recognized Ayana. Many recognized Caleb. Their arrival changed the temperature of the confrontation. Everyone lower your weapons, Ayana said, her voice carrying authority earned over 2 decades of work. Before someone gets killed over something that can be solved with surveyors and lawyers. A settler, red-faced and aggressive, shouted back, This land is ours by right. The survey was wrong. Then prove it, in court, with proper legal proceedings, not with guns. Courts are run by the government. They'll side with the Indians. Caleb spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had seen too much violence and refused to see more. I've lived in this territory 40 years, worked as Army Scout, built a life here, and I can tell you one thing with absolute certainty. The government doesn't side with anybody except whoever has the best lawyers and the clearest documentation. He gestured at the water source they were fighting over. You want that water? Get a surveyor out here. Get a judge to look at the maps. Do it legal. Because if you try to take it by force, you won't just be fighting Apache. You'll be fighting every person in this territory who believes in rule of law. The settler looked around, suddenly aware that public opinion was not on his side. Other settlers in his group began lowering their weapons, recognizing that violence would gain them nothing but trouble. Fine, we'll get a surveyor. Good choice. As the tension drained from the situation, Red Sky Walker approached Caleb and Ayana. His ancient eyes sparkled with something like amusement. 18 years ago I told you that your path would be fire, granddaughter. You have walked through it and not been consumed. He turned to Caleb. And you, mountain man, I told you that the only way to be free from the past was to face it. You have done this, built a new life on the ashes of the old one. We both have, Caleb said quietly. Yes, together. That is the wisdom. Red Sky Walker placed a weathered hand on each of their shoulders. You have shown what is possible when people choose understanding over hatred. Your daughter will carry this forward, and her children after her." He stepped back, his blessing given. "Go home now. Rest. You have earned it." That evening, the porch. Caleb and Ayanna sat in their customary chairs, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of red and gold. They were older now, worn by years and work and worry, but they sat together, as they had for 18 years, finding peace in shared silence and the knowledge that they had built something meaningful. "Do you ever think about that day?" Ayanna asked. "When you found me on the trail?" "Every time I look at you." "What do you think?" Caleb considered, watching the light fade. "I think about how close you came to dying, how easy it would have been to ride past, how my whole life changed because I made one choice to stop instead of continuing on." He turned to look at her directly. "And I think about how grateful I am that I stopped, that I got to be part of your story, that we got to build this together." Ayanna reached over and took his hand. "I was so angry for so long. At Brennan, at the system that protected him, at the world that seemed designed to destroy people like me. And now? Now I'm just grateful. For you, for Nita, for the work, for every day we get together." She smiled. "Brennan died in prison, forgotten and unmourned. We built a life, raised a daughter, helped change this territory for the better. That's justice, in its own way. That's more than justice. That's victory." They sat holding hands as darkness claimed the valley and stars emerged one by one. Behind them, through the open window, they could hear Nita practicing her reading, her voice clear and confident as she worked through a difficult passage. The future, reading by lamplight, the bridge they had built, preparing to carry the work forward. "No regrets?" Ayanna asked. "Not one," Caleb answered. "You? Only that I didn't meet you sooner. We met when we were supposed to meet. Not a moment earlier, not a moment later." She laughed softly. "When did you become so philosophical?" 18 years married to you. Had to become philosophical to keep up." They sat together as the stars filled the sky. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something that would outlast them both. A marriage, a family, a legacy of fighting for what was right, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The mountain man and the Apache woman. The pathfinders who proved different worlds could unite. The ones who proved that understanding could overcome hatred, that justice could prevail over corruption, that love could grow even in the harshest soil. Their story had begun with violence and pain, but it had become something beautiful, something lasting, something worth passing down to the next generation and the one after that. That was the real victory, not the trial or the treaty or any single battle won, but the daily choice, made over and over for 18 years, to stand together, to build together, to believe together that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. The stars watched, as they always had, those who wait forever, witnessing the small triumphs and quiet victories that, taken together, made up a life worth living. And in the morning, they would wake and do it all again. Because that was what partnership meant, what love meant, what building a legacy required. One day at a time, one choice at a time. One moment of courage building upon another until, looking back, you could see that you had climbed mountains without even realizing it. That was their story. That was their truth. And it was enough.